White House is becoming increasingly concerned about the prospect of enhanced unemployment benefits expiring, and tomorrow is the endgame. If unemployment benefits go away completely, more than 30 million Americans will see an income cut between 50 and 75% virtually overnight.
However, negotiations stalled out on Wednesday with leaders from both parties unable to reach an agreement on extending those unemployment benefits. Washington Post economics reporter Jeff Stein is here with the absolute latest. Great to see you, as always, Jeff.
Good to see you, Jeff.
Thanks, guys. Good to be back.
So what is the state of play this morning?
You know, I actually think this is, if I'm someone who's unemployed and depending on these benefits, this is the most optimistic I've felt in a long time. And I know that sounds counterintuitive because we're so close to the deadline and the odds of them reaching a deal today or tomorrow seem so limited and so narrow. But we've seen really increasing, I think it's fair to say, desperation from Trump's top people. Even Trump himself yesterday seems to recognize, despite sort of his stated opposition to extending these benefits in full, he seems to understand that the political headwinds here are really intense, that it's not popular in the middle of a pandemic when the economy is already contracted and unemployment rate is at 11% to cut the incomes, as you mentioned, of 30 million people. And he said quite explicitly yesterday, you know, we want to get a deal done. We want to take care of the people. He said something that didn't make a lot of sense about how we want to take care of the people with bigger payments than the Democrats. Republicans have been the one pushing dramatic cuts to unemployment benefits. Democrats have called for extending them in full. But you sense that at some sort of raw political instinct level, the president has shifted, and he's in a place that I don't think he really was even last week, where he was saying, you know, we'll do the 70% wage replacement. I don't know if it was the headlines or the cable news, but something appears to have gotten through to him where he is clearly wary that this will be a nightmare for him at a time when he's already way down in the polls. And so I think that, coupled with the sense from congressional Democrats that they have the upper hand here, that it's going to look like this is the Republicans' fault if this expires, in part because Republicans have waited until this week to actually come out with a concrete proposal. Democrats, at least the Democrats I talk to, feel increasingly emboldened that they have leverage here and that it will be Republicans that have to bend to them in their proposal.
Right. And Jeff, I mean, I've noticed the exact same thing, huge shift in tone. However, as you just pointed out, what is the political incentive actually for Democrats in order to work to pass some sort of unemployment extension? And do you expect that to be part of a larger package? Because as I understand it, there only seems to be some possible motivation for like a skinny bill, which is just unemployment and maybe something on evictions. Where's your head at there? What are you thinking?
Yeah, so Nancy Pelosi has been saying adamantly that, no, we're not doing a piecemeal deal. And I think the big thing there is that she sees all these needs, including the state and local money, as a huge thing. And if Republicans want to say, we'll do a skinny bill that leaves out the tremendous needs from states and cities across the country, that's a deal that Democrats aren't going to be interested in taking. I actually kind of think that this is a negotiating position. I don't have really firm evidence to state that, and maybe shouldn't be speculating on it, but it seems to me that if Republicans come to Democrats and say, we'll give you the unemployment extension, we'll give you another round of stimulus checks, we'll provide maybe something on state and local aid, we'll do another round of PPP money, I just don't see how Democrats can say no to that. It's so many of their priorities. Not only that, it's really requiring the Republicans to come back to the table if they're going to get what they want, which is this liability shield for businesses and other employers that basically insulates them from lawsuits. So I think it's possible that Pelosi's rejection of the piecemeal approach is really just her way of forcing Republicans to amp up their ask, because Pelosi knows that voters tend to blame the White House for policy outcomes.
Right.
And if the White House is responsible for overseeing this dramatic unemployment cut, I mean, I've been getting emails from Trump voters who are saying this is really dangerous. I blame the White House if this happens. Not that many emails, but enough to make me think that there might be something going on here, that there's a real risk for Trump and that he may understand that at some level.
Yeah, but what about the Republican Senate caucus? Because we've been hearing, Lindsey Graham out saying, like, if they get half of our caucus on board with this stimulus, then I would be surprised. And that's with cutting the unemployment benefits down to $200. That's with offering no state and local aid. So if you're talking about, okay, now we're going to do a full benefit extension and we're going to maybe throw in some money for state and local aid, are they going to be able to keep a significant amount of the Republicans on board with that?
Yeah, and that's you've really got the essence of this like great vexing question that McConnell has been completely unable to this huge Rubik's Cube. And the crux of it is that, he starting from the negotiations at the beginning, he already had, most of the aides I talked to said 10, 15, maybe 20 Republican senators who thought that what he was proposing was too liberal, too big spending, too far. And so to make a deal with Democrats, he has to increase the price tag and make it more liberal. But that means that he'll lose more members, right? So the further left the bill goes, the further he erodes support on his right flank. And at this point, I think we're very likely to see a deal. This is what one very plugged-in lobbyist predicted yesterday, that you'll get a deal that basically almost all Democrats vote for, the chairs of the appropriations committees, because they have all their pet projects in there, and then all of the Republicans who are up for re-election in sort of swing states, so like Cory Gardner in Colorado, Susan Collins in Maine, all of them will vote for it. And if you get all of those plus McConnell, and then maybe he sort of like, put something in there to benefit, the Alaska, some sort of pet project for various states, that maybe with all of that, he could get it done. But it's really this bizarre moment for the Republican Party where they seem so split. I think just the stimulus payments are a great example where, I have friends who are talking about this as quasi-UBI, and the fact that they're going to do another one of these seems incredibly exciting to them. They're like, we're on the path to creating basically a quasi-UBI experiment where we're sending, income supports to, 70 million people twice a year. And that's like in the socialist utopian fantasy that something like this would happen. And the Republican Party put it in their bill twice. And some Republicans are saying, wait a minute, like, why are we going along with this? And I think a lot of them are also sort of looking to a Joe Biden presidency and saying, if we commit our party to this degree of income support, how are we going to honestly resist that and have any ideological credibility, next year?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is what I'm very interested in. Obviously, we cover it a lot here on the show. So in general, Jeff, if we were to see that negotiating position from Pelosi kind of not fall apart, or she were to give in and say, okay, we can pass some sort of skinny bill, what is the timeline going to be on this in terms of action? Are they meeting today, next week, over the weekend? What's going on?
Yeah, they'll definitely be meeting today. We had sort of an unusual setup over the weekend. Part of the issue, from what I've gathered in my reporting, is that the White House has been bleeding top economic officials with sort of macroeconomic experience for weeks, really months now. The head of the CEA, the White House Council of Economic Advisors left. Larry Kudlow, the head of the National Economic Council, lost his top deputy. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin lost a few of his top aides. So there's sort of been a bit of a brain drain in White House economic firepower. Mm-hmm. And as a result, Mark Meadows and Mnuchin have themselves been meeting with Republican staffers. So this, I think, has been a very unusual arrangement and has complicated the timeline. They continue to meet sort of all this week and probably into the weekend. Meadows came out of meetings yesterday extremely dejected, saying, we're very far apart. We don't know what's going to happen. But I think it's very possible that Trump just sort of tells Mnuchin, get a deal done. I guess it's not really completely responsive to your question, but remember, Mark Meadows, the Freedom Caucus guy, right. The listeners will probably remember, his role in the debt ceiling fights, right? Like walking the U.S. to the
I remember it very well.
Yeah, right. So the guy who was the main progenitor of that movement and that push, sort of the arch conservative negotiator, is now in the room with Mnuchin, who has been Trump's bipartisan deal maker, who's been willing to work with Democrats. And right now, the speculation is that Meadows is sort of preventing Mnuchin from just sort of agreeing to what Democrats want and giving Trump a deal. But as Trump senses this political headwind and this political pressure, the odds seem to increase that he says, just ignore Meadows. Meadows was there to babysit, but the importance of getting a deal is just so great that we just need to cut something, get something off the table. So I think the odds of that will go up over the weekend as the headlines ramp up about people all over the country being terrified for what comes next for them.
Yeah, well, and we also got some dire economic news this morning in terms of GDP contraction, in terms of continuing unemployment claims rising, in terms of, week over week unemployment claims ticking up once again. So if nothing else, hopefully that spurs some action. Jeff, it's always great to have your insights on this. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it, Jeff.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it, guys. Take care.
Yep. Next on Rising, Matt Stoller, he weighs in on big tech in front of Congress yesterday. That's when Rising continues.